It started like any other day. At least, that's what I thought. I had been following the same routine for weeks, trying to push aside that nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. My wife, Jessica, had been distant lately, but I brushed it off as stress from work. After all, we had built a life together over the past 18 years, and I never imagined anything could come between us. But now, thinking back, the signs were there. Little things that I didn't fully understand at the time, but in hindsight, they all made sense. I spent most days in my head, driving around, running errands, and just going through the motions of life. That day wasn't any different, until it was. I was sitting at a red light, feeling a little more worn out than usual when something unexpected happened. You know how sometimes, being in the wrong place at the wrong time changes everything? Well, this was one of those moments. A guy in the car next to me motioned for me to roll down my window. "You've got a flat," he said. Thankful for the heads up, I pulled into a Walmart parking lot to check it out. Sure enough, a screw had punctured the tire, causing a slow leak. Just my luck, right? I figured I'd patch it up and head home, maybe grab one of those sealant kits while I was at it. But when I pulled the screw out to fix it, things got worse. Air hissed out faster than I expected, and I quickly screwed it back in, filling the tire at a nearby gas station. I was only about 15 minutes from home, so I kept an eye on the tire. A few miles down the road, I noticed in the side mirror that the air was low again. I pulled into another parking lot and used the slime to patch it up. Green goo oozed out, stopping the leak. Just as I was about to get back in the car, a huge pickup truck pulled up next to me. You know the kind, the ones with oversized tires, jacked up so high you practically need a ladder to climb in. I recognized that truck right away. The door swung open, and out stepped a tall guy with blonde hair, cowboy boots, and a belt buckle the size of Texas. I laughed to myself at the sight, but the humor didn't last long. The passenger door opened, and my heart dropped into my stomach. Jessica, my wife of 18 years, stepped out of the truck. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. She was with him. They didn't even notice me sitting there in my company car, a small, forgettable import that blended into the background. They walked into the store, holding hands, laughing together like teenagers. It felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me. I couldn't move, couldn't think, just sat there, frozen, as the pieces started falling into place. That guy, I remembered him now. His name was Ryan, and he worked with Jessica. She was the office manager at a local mental health clinic, and he was in customer service. I'd seen his truck outside her office before, but I never thought anything of it. Now, I couldn't help but ask myself what the hell my wife was doing with him. And why wasn't she at work? I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but something was definitely wrong. So, I waited. They came out of the store a little while later, both holding coffee cups. He helped her into the truck, and they drove off together. I followed them, keeping a safe distance, of course, until they pulled into our driveway. Ryan drove into the garage, and the door shut behind them. I sat in my car for about half an hour, trying to process everything. I didn't know what to do, but I knew one thing: I wasn't leaving until I had some answers. I couldn't just sit there any longer, so I checked my tire one more time. It seemed to be holding up, but my mind was far from settled. After another 2 hours, Ryan's truck finally backed out of the garage, and they drove past me without even noticing. I quickly held up a file folder to hide my face, not that they would have noticed, they were too wrapped up in each other. It was only 2:30, and Jessica wasn't supposed to leave work until 5. That left me with some time. I decided to head inside the house and see if I could find any clues, anything that might explain what I had just witnessed. When I walked in, the house was eerily quiet. The only sound was the steady drip from the leaky faucet in my daughter Emily's bathroom, another repair I'd been meaning to get to, and the faint hum of the air conditioning. Everything seemed normal at first glance, but I wasn't convinced. I went upstairs, and that's when I noticed the bed had fresh sheets on it. My heart sank. It hit me like a ton of bricks. There was really only one explanation for this, wasn't there? I leaned back against the wall, sliding down until I was sitting on the floor, feeling completely numb. I had been blindsided, and my mind was spinning. I couldn't even think straight. After sitting there for what felt like an eternity, I forced myself to get up. My stomach was in knots, but I needed to keep moving. I grabbed a soda from the fridge and splashed some cold water on my face in the bathroom. That's when I saw it, The shower floor was still wet. They had showered before they left, probably cleaning up after whatever they had done. It was like I had walked into a crime scene. I stood there, horrified, trying to grasp what had just happened. The bed, the shower, it all added up. There was no denying it anymore. Jessica had betrayed me. I knew right then and there that divorce was inevitable, but beyond that, I had no idea what to do next. My thoughts were jumbled, and my mind was racing, but one thing was clear. I still had to pick up Emily from school, and I had no clue what I was going to tell her. Somehow, I managed to pull myself together, though I was a complete wreck. I wasn't in any shape to drive, but I couldn't just leave Emily waiting. As I pulled into the line of cars at her school, I spotted her standing by the front door. She looked beautiful, just like always, with her dark hair, so much like her mother's, and her bright hazel eyes that always seemed to sparkle with life. She tossed her backpack in the back seat and leaned in to give me a kiss, but something must have tipped her off because she froze mid-motion. "Dad, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "You don't look so good. Is something wrong with Mom? What happened?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I said, though my voice probably didn't sound convincing. "But we need to talk. Let's head to the park for a bit, okay? I just need to sit down with you for a while." She looked worried, but nodded. "Okay, Dad, but you're scaring me." I didn't have the words, not yet. I just drove us to the park, the same park where I used to push her on the swings when she was little. Those memories felt like they belonged to a different life, a happier one. We sat on a bench, and she took my hand, just like she used to when she was a kid. For a moment, I didn't know what to say, but Emily wasn't going to let me off the hook that easily. "Just tell me, Dad. I can handle it," she said softly. "I'm not sure I can," I whispered. But then I did. I told her everything, what I had seen, what I was feeling, how my whole world had been turned upside down in just a matter of hours. As I talked, tears streamed down my face, and she held my hand the entire time, listening without interrupting. When I finally finished, she pulled me into a tight hug. "Dad, that sounds bad," she said quietly. "But we need to talk to Mom about it, don't we? I mean, we don't have the full story. Maybe there's more to it than what it seems." I admired her strength, even in that moment. My little girl was braver than I could have ever hoped to be. She was right, though. I couldn't jump to conclusions without hearing what Jessica had to say. But deep down, I already knew the truth. Emily stood up, giving my hand a tug. "Come on, Dad. Let's go home and talk to her." She had just gotten her driver's license and was eager to show off her skills, so I let her drive us home. As we pulled into the driveway, there was Jessica's car, parked in the garage, just like nothing was out of the ordinary. Jessica greeted us with a smile when we walked in, acting as if everything was perfectly normal. "Hey, how about we order takeout tonight?" she asked, her voice full of cheer. "My treat." Emily didn't waste any time. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her voice calm but firm. Jessica looked confused. "What's going on, sweetheart? Everything okay?" "No, Mom. It's not," Emily replied. "We need to find out what's really going on." We all went into the living room, and Emily sat next to me on the couch while Jessica settled into that ugly chair she insisted on buying years ago. She still looked calm, but I could see her confusion growing. "What's wrong?" she asked, her smile faltering just a bit. "How was your day?" I asked, my voice as even as I could manage. Jessica gave me a puzzled look. "Busy," she said. "One of the reps brought in lunch, and I barely had a moment to breathe." "Why? So, you've been at the office all day?" Emily asked, her eyes narrowing slightly. Jessica nodded, her smile returning. "Of course, honey. Why the questions? What's going on?" I didn't waste any more time. "So, you weren't here this afternoon? You weren't at the house with Ryan?" I asked, watching her face closely. Her smile vanished instantly, and her face went pale. "No," she stammered, "of course not. What are you talking about?" "I saw you, Jessica," I said, my voice steady but low. "I saw you with him." Her mouth opened and closed a few times before she managed to get any words out. "You didn't see anything," she blurted out, her voice trembling. "What are you trying to say?" Emily's voice was calm but firm. "Mom, don't lie. Dad isn't making this up. and I don't think you're telling the truth." Jessica's eyes darted between the two of us, her mind clearly racing to figure out what to say next. I was at work," she insisted. "You can ask Angel, my coworker. She'll tell you." "I don't need to ask Angel," I said. "I know what I saw, and so does Emily. You were with Ryan, Jessica. You came back here with him. I followed you." The room fell silent for a moment. Jessica's eyes flicked between me and Emily again, but she knew there was no way out. Finally, she sighed and slumped back in the chair. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I was here. But I didn't want to tell you because I knew you'd twist it around. I knew you'd accuse me of something." "No one accused you of anything," Emily said, her voice soft but filled with disappointment. "But I am now. Mom, are you having an affair with Ryan? Is that what's going on?" Jessica's eyes filled with panic, and for a second I thought she might try to deny it again. But then, something in her seemed to break. She looked down at her hands, took a deep breath, and finally spoke. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm in love with Ryan. I didn't plan for this to happen, but it did. We just connected. It was like something I couldn't stop. I didn't mean for you to find out this way. I'm sorry, Oliver." "I'm sorry, Emily." The room went completely still. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. Emily sat there, staring at her mother in disbelief, her fists clenched in her lap. Jessica kept talking, her voice shaky. "Ryan, he feels like my other half. We're planning to get married once we both get divorced. It'll be okay, Emily. You can see your dad whenever you want. Ryan has a beautiful house by the lake. You'll love it there. I'm so sorry you had to find out like this." Emily's face flushed with anger, and she shot up from the couch. "Are you insane?" she shouted. "I'm not going to live with that guy. He's creepy, Mom. I'm staying with Dad, and I don't even want to see you if he's around. How could you do this to us?" She turned and stormed up the stairs, slamming her bedroom door behind her. I heard the lock click, and then there was silence again. Jessica looked at me, her face pale and trembling. "She'll get over it," she said quietly. "She'll come around. Ryan is a good guy, Oliver. You'll see. He makes me happy. I'm sorry, but I need to be happy." Her words hit me like a slap. This wasn't the woman I married. I stared at her, barely recognizing the person sitting in front of me. I wasn't going to argue anymore. It was clear that whatever we had was over. "When are you moving out?" I asked, my voice flat and cold. She blinked, clearly taken aback. "Moving out? I don't have anywhere to go yet. Ryan's still married, and we need to tell his wife before we make any decisions." I shook my head. "You're moving out, Jessica. I'll give you 3 days." Her mouth dropped open. "You can't just kick me out. This is my house too." "No, it's not," I said. "I owned this house before we even met. It's paid off, and your name isn't on the deed. You've got 3 days. Her eyes filled with tears. "Oliver, please, don't do this. We can still be friends. Ryan wants to be your friend, too. We've been together for so long. We don't have to throw everything away." I stared at her, feeling the weight of everything crash down on me. "Friends? Are you kidding me? Jessica, you're the enemy now. I'll give you 3 days, and after that, I never want to see you again." I turned and walked away, leaving her sitting there, speechless. That was it. The end of everything. Jessica tried following me, still rambling on about staying friends, but I wasn't hearing it. I went straight to our bedroom and started moving her things into the spare room. She had so many clothes in the closet, so I just grabbed whatever I could carry and threw them onto the bed in the other room. Jessica stood there watching me, tears streaming down her face, still trying to talk her way out of it. When I had moved most of her stuff, I took the chance to lock the bedroom door. I heard her try the knob a few minutes later, but when she couldn't get in, she gave up and walked away. I was relieved to finally have a moment to myself, even if my mind was still spinning. I couldn't believe it had come to this. The woman I had loved for nearly 2 decades had completely betrayed me, and now all I could feel was a burning anger inside. How could she do this to our family? To me? To Emily? Speaking of Emily, I heard her send me a text a little while later. "Are you okay, Dad?" she asked. I replied, "I'm hanging in there, kitten. How about you?" She responded quickly, "No, but I'll be okay." That was my girl. She was strong, stronger than I ever gave her credit for. I sent back, "I love you, Em. I'll always be here for you." "I love you too, Dad. Can you drive me to school tomorrow?" "I don't want to ride with her." I knew her meant Jessica. I promised her I would, and with that, I finally crawled into bed. Sleep didn't come easy. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I didn't know how I was going to get through this, but one thing was certain: Emily was my priority now. I had to be strong for her. The next morning, I dragged myself out of bed, exhausted and emotionally drained. I took a quick shower and called my boss, explaining that I was going through a divorce and needed some time off. He was understanding, told me to take as much time as I needed, and offered his condolences. I made breakfast for Emily and me, trying to keep things as normal as possible for her. She came down, looking as beautiful as ever, though I could tell she was still upset. We ate in silence for the most part, but Jessica eventually wandered into the kitchen, trying to act like everything was normal. "Are you ready for school, Emily?" she asked, trying to smile. Emily didn't even look at her. "I'm riding with Dad," she said flatly. Jessica's smile faltered. "Fine," she muttered, clearly frustrated. "Act like children if that makes you feel better." She stormed off, grabbing her purse before leaving the house. The tension between us was thick, but at least she was gone for the moment. I dropped Emily off at school, and as she got out of the car, she leaned in to kiss me on the cheek. "Thanks, Dad," she said. "I love you." "I love you too, sweetheart. We're going to get through this," I assured her, watching her walk into the building. After I dropped her off, I sat in the car for a few minutes, thinking about my next steps. One name popped into my mind: Dan. Dan was a good friend of mine who had recently gone through a nasty divorce, so I figured he might have some advice. I gave him a call, and he didn't hesitate to recommend a lawyer, though he didn't suggest his own. Instead, he said I should hire his ex-wife's lawyer, someone who had been ruthless in their divorce case. I looked up the number and made the call. When I explained my situation to the receptionist, she quickly set me up with a meeting for that afternoon. I wasn't wasting any time. Before heading to the meeting, I decided to take some immediate action. Jessica and I shared a few credit cards, and there was no way I was going to let her rack up a huge bill while she was running around with Ryan. So, I called the credit card company and lowered the limits to $500. It would affect me too, but I'd rather take that hit than finance her affair. Later that afternoon, I met with the lawyer, Elizabeth Baxter. She was no nonsense, and our meeting didn't start off on the best foot. She assumed I was the one leaving Jessica for someone else. "You've got it wrong," I said firmly. "Jessica is the one having an affair. She's been seeing this guy from her work, and they're both planning to divorce their spouses and get married." Elizabeth's expression softened. "I'm sorry. I don't usually represent people who leave for someone else. That's not something I feel comfortable with." I nodded. "I understand. I just want to make sure my daughter is okay through all of this. What do you think my chances are of getting custody?" She leaned back in her chair, considering the question. "It's possible," she said. "In theory, custody can go to either parent, but in practice, it's harder for fathers, especially with daughters." "How old is your daughter?" "She's 15, I answered. "And she wants to live with me." Elizabeth smiled slightly. "That's a big plus. In this state, children over the age of 14 can choose which parent they want to live with, and their wishes are taken into account. If she were younger, your chances would be slim, but since she's 15 and wants to stay with you, that works in your favor." I left the meeting feeling a little more hopeful, but I knew there was still a long road ahead. This divorce wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready to fight for Emily. She was all that mattered now. As I drove home, I kept thinking about what my next move should be. Part of me wanted to do something drastic, something to really hit Jessica where it hurt. But I knew I had to keep my cool. If I got arrested or did something reckless, I'd lose Emily, and that wasn't an option. I started planning. Jessica's parents needed to know what was going on, and I knew they would be devastated. They adored me and worshipped Emily, so they deserved to hear the truth. And then there was Ryan's wife. She probably had no idea what was happening either. I needed to let her know. She deserved to hear the truth, just like I had. That afternoon, I started taking the steps I'd been thinking about. First, I logged onto Jessica's Facebook page. We had a shared family account, and she was always on it. I knew exactly what to do. I posted an update, announcing our divorce and including a photo of Ryan, the guy Jessica had fallen for. It felt like a punch to the gut, but I knew it had to be done. People deserved to know what kind of person Jessica had turned into. After that, I changed the password so she couldn't log in. I sat back, waiting for the fireworks. And they came. My phone started buzzing about 2 hours later. It was Jessica, and she was furious. "You absolute piece of trash," she yelled the moment I picked up. "You posted that crap on Facebook. Everyone's blowing up my phone. Ryan's wife doesn't even know yet. You need to take it down." I was calm. "No, Jessica. You don't get to dictate what happens anymore. Everyone should know the truth." "You're a child," she screamed. "You're ruining everything." "Funny, I thought you already ruined everything when you decided to cheat," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You gave up any control over this situation the moment you chose him. Now deal with the consequences." I hung up, ignoring the flood of calls and texts that followed. It was done. Everyone knew. I'd let Jessica's world burn, and it gave me a sense of satisfaction I hadn't felt in days. Later that evening, when I picked up Emily from school, she was eager to hear how things were going with the lawyer. I told her everything Elizabeth had said, and Emily seemed relieved. "So, I'll get to stay with you, right, Dad?" "That's what it looks like, sweetheart," I replied. "We're going to be okay." She sighed in relief but still seemed a bit distant. "What's wrong, kiddo?" I asked, concerned. "Dad, I just don't want to see Mom anymore. Not if Ryan's around. I don't trust him. He gives me the creeps." I nodded. "I promise, you won't have to be around him unless I'm there too. We'll make sure of that." We stopped for pizza on the way home and tried to act like everything was normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. When I got home, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Jessica's dad, Bob. "Oliver, what's going on?" Bob asked, his voice tired. "Rachel showed up at our place last night, asking to stay with us. She didn't say much, just that you kicked her out. Care to explain?" I sighed. "Did you ask her why I kicked her out?" Bob hesitated. "She said she'd tell us later. But I want to hear it from you." I took a deep breath and laid it all out for him. "She's been having an affair, Bob. I caught her with a guy from work. She admitted to everything." There was silence on the other end, and then I heard Emily's soft voice. "Hi, Grandpa. I'm on speaker. I was there when Mom admitted it." "I'm sorry, Grandpa. I love you." I could hear the pain in Bob's voice when he spoke again. "Oh, sweetheart. I love you too. I'm so sorry this is happening." "Oliver, are you sure about all of this?" "I'm sure, Bob. I wish it weren't true, but it is." Bob sighed heavily. "We'll talk to her. Don't worry about Emily. We love her, and nothing will change that." The call went better than I expected, but I knew it wasn't over. Life was happening fast, and I had no choice but to keep up. The next several months were a blur of court dates, legal paperwork, and awkward run-ins with Jessica. I fought hard for custody of Emily, and in the end, I won. The court granted me full custody, with Jessica getting visitation rights, though Emily made it clear she didn't want to be around Ryan. The judge respected her wishes, and Ryan was never to be left alone with her. As for Jessica and Ryan, their soulmate fantasy didn't last long. Ryan's wife divorced him, and within a couple of weeks, he was already chasing another woman at the office. Jessica had ruined everything for a man who wasn't even willing to stick around. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a bit of satisfaction when I heard about that. The divorce process took about 7 months to finalize. Jessica even tried to drag it out by requesting counseling sessions, thinking maybe I'd change my mind. I didn't. We went through the motions, sitting in front of a couple of old counselors who seemed more interested in spouting New Age nonsense than actually solving anything. Every session felt like a waste of time. At one point, Jessica asked me what it would take to get me to reconsider the divorce. I told her flat out, "It would take an act of God, Jessica. Unless you can turn back time and undo what you did, there's no fixing this." She didn't argue. She knew it was over. Finally, the judge signed the divorce papers, And just like that, it was done. Jessica was out of my life. Emily was thriving, stronger than ever, and despite everything, we had come out on the other side. As the dust settled, something unexpected happened. Emily's best friend, Grace, had been spending a lot of time with us, and her mom, Sarah, started to join us for weekend trips to the lake. At first, it was all about the kids, but over time, I started to feel something more for Sarah. She was sweet, funny, and had a strength to her that reminded me how much I had missed companionship. One weekend, after a long day of water skiing with the girls, I finally worked up the courage to ask Sarah out. "You think maybe we could grab dinner sometime, just the two of us?" I asked, trying to keep it casual. Sarah smiled, her brown eyes lighting up. "I'd love that, Oliver." That simple moment felt like a turning point. A few months passed after Sarah and I started dating, and life continued to move forward, one day at a time. The tension with Jessica had slowly eased. Though she was still a part of Emily's life, our interactions became less frequent, and thankfully, Ryan was no longer in the picture. Jessica moved out of her parents' house and into a small apartment. We only spoke when it was absolutely necessary, and even then, it was brief. Emily, though, had become my rock through all of it. She thrived at school, was making plans for college, and spent more time with her friends than ever before. She was growing up so fast, and watching her become the strong, independent young woman she was destined to be filled me with pride. Sarah became more involved in our lives too. The more time we spent together, the more I realized how much she had brought back into my life. The lightness, the laughter, the simple joy of sharing your day with someone who truly cares. It was refreshing, a reminder that even after all the hurt and betrayal, life had a way of offering second chances. One night, after a particularly fun weekend at the lake, Sarah and I were sitting on the porch, just the two of us, as the kids slept inside. The stars were bright, and the gentle breeze felt perfect. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and I could feel her contentment radiating through that simple gesture. "You know," she said softly, "I never thought I'd find this again. This peace. After everything that's happened, I thought it was out of reach." I smiled, kissing the top of her head. "I know exactly what you mean. I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again either." She looked up at me, her brown eyes warm and full of affection. "Do you think we could make this forever?" I turned to her, feeling my heart swell. "I do, Sarah. I really do." It wasn't the grand proposal you see in movies. There wasn't any big gesture or fancy ring, just two people sitting together, realizing that through all the pain and heartache, they'd found something real. Something lasting. And that was more than enough for me. As time moved on, we blended our families even more. Grace and Emily became inseparable, like sisters, and Sarah and I grew closer by the day. We never rushed anything, but we always knew where we were headed. Life became less about the past and more about what lay ahead. Jessica, in her own way, found her own path too. I didn't know all the details, but I heard she eventually moved on with someone new, though we had little contact outside of our shared responsibility for Emily. We managed to keep things civil for our daughter's sake, and that was enough. Looking back, the betrayal that once felt like the end of my world had become the turning point that led me to something far better. It wasn't an easy road. There were days I didn't think I'd get through it. But here I was, stronger, happier, and surrounded by the people who mattered most. In the end, that's what life is about. Finding the strength to move forward, embracing the people who stand by you, and leaving the darkness behind. And as I sat there, holding Sarah close, I knew that no matter what happened next, I had finally found the life I was always meant to live. Thank you for visiting my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.